Right now, joining us to talk Little Bruins, it's Mike Milbury, brought to you by Shaw's and Star Market, perfecting the art of fresh, by findmassmoney.gov, and by John Sewer, the name to know when your drains don't flow. He joins us on the Harbor One hotline, as he always does on Thursdays. Good morning, Mike Milbury.
Good morning. How are you guys doing? Getting ready to go skiing, huh?
Yeah, we have you ever been a skier?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I mean I've been, but I'd be as afraid as Wiggy is right now.
Well, I told him, Mike, if I can't walk up and walk down the hill, I'm not skiing.
Isn't that one of those things that they put into the contract of a professional athlete that they cannot do in the off season?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, part of all those things, driving a motorcycle, anything.
So they put all that in your contract. They tell you can't do it.
Yeah, all those things
And they can really stiff you if they want to. Hey, listen, I was listening to you guys talk about social media. It reminded me of a conversation I had with my little grandson, Emmett, who's 5, who wanted to know. He comes into the house, he's got his iPad, goes right to the Xbox, but he wanted to know what it was like when I was 5. So I told him I'd write him a letter, and I started to write this letter, and I thought, like, oh, my God, I'm a dinosaur here. And we had a black and white TV with rabbit ears. There was no daycare. There was no electronics. And as Wiggy was talking about, there was no parental supervision. Our idea of a good time was to go down by the rail yard and pick blueberries. And one story I have for you is one day we were picking blueberries, and the train was rolling slowly into the yard. So imps that we started throwing rocks at the train. And one of the rocks came back and ricocheted off the side of the boxcar, hit me in the head, and I went down like a ton of bricks, bleeding all over my head. It was crazy. And the train stopped, and they formed a bucket brigade, like a lineup, and they picked me up. And I was only 5, and they tossed me from one guy to the next, put me in the car, and the train took off and went down to a mile to an infirmary that was part of a company that was nearby. And they stitched me up and then finally called my mother. And she came down, picked me up. She wasn't too happy, but that just wouldn't happen today. It just wouldn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that without supervision, that somehow there weren't horrendous things. Well, maybe I guess there were.
There
in this
were a
particular
lot.
case, there were things
There
that
was
went on.
definitely
But you didn't get the idea to throw the rock from TikTok. It wasn't like the rock challenge, y'all. You came up with that on your own.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we used to go climb the shaky tree, too, because if you climbed high enough, the wind would blow the top of the tree, but you also get a view of the old John Hancock building, which was the tallest building in the city at that time. Yeah. That was our idea of fun.
Oh, that sounds like a better time.
Okay. It
does, like a simpler time.
Uh-huh. No anxiety from the social medias, getting the likes.
Till that white van pulls up and says, hey, you want some chocolate candy, young girl?
Those white vans are still around.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, we got to look forward to the All-Star game this weekend. It sucks. I hate it. It just sucks. I mean, why don't they give these superstars, instead of making them go halfway across the country, and a season where they play 82 games and beat each other up, and give them the week off so we could have a nice run through the last couple months and into the playoffs. But for a few bucks and a few chuckles, they make everybody go across the country. I will not be watching.
You're not going to watch it all?
No. Why would I watch?
What about the
crap?
skills stuff? Do you like watching the skills?
Okay, it's a little bit shticky and it's kind of fun, but I stand by my comments. I think the All-Star game is a waste of time. Makes the advertisers happy, makes the commissioner happy, and makes the players, for the most part, a little more fatigued.
I think the All-Star games are jokes in all the sports. I think the only one that actually did it right at one point in time was baseball when
it mattered.
When the winning team
got home field.
Yeah, something like that. Because Mike's right. It's like just a waste of time, especially in hockey and basketball. It's like right during the season. At least the NFL waits till the season's over and they play their stupid one.
Yes, wait till play the All-Star game in ball hockey in the summer and have a golf tournament or something so they can have a real good time, and advertisers will be happy then. But during the middle of the season, I think it's silly.
Is this team at where you thought it would be at the All-Star break or better?
Oh, it's so much better. I mean, I asked a lot of people this week, what we talked about last week is, are they real? Are they actually a challenger? And I think everybody was sort of on the fence. It's been such a revelation. I mean, we're looking at Coyle, and one of the great turnarounds or improvements that I've ever seen in a professional player, becoming a number 1 center on track. He and Zach are on track to make the same number or more points than Krejci and Bergeron last year. And who saw that coming?
Right.
And the guy they got in the third hole at center, Morgan Geekie, will probably have more points than Charlie Coyle had last year. So everything's gone right. You got to give the coach a ton of credit. There's still some issues, I believe. They're susceptible to a hard forecheck. I'm not sure some of these guys are battle hardened yet. A guy like Lindholm, he's going to have to prove it to me. But, there was a big trade yesterday. Lindholm went from Calgary, went to Vancouver. The Bruins are supposedly involved in talking about him, but that's off the table. But, they don't have much to deal with. I mean, they have to look at whether they want to sign DeBrusk, give him the money that he wants. They have to look at Potra. Is he a guy that they want to keep? I mean, he looks like he's got some flashes of brilliance, but there's not a lot there to move if you take Allmark out of the equation, which I think they have. There's not a lot for them to do. They don't have a pick in the first 3 rounds. Their prospects are rated like 30th in the league, which is not a good thing. But the door is open. It's kind of wide open there's nobody there that's just a complete juggernaut, with the exception lately of Edmonton, who's now won 16 in a row, which is mind-boggling. So I don't know what to tell you. I feel like the question's going to be answered in the playoffs. But there's reason to believe, if they're first overall at this point in the season and they've covered their greatest weakness at center from within house mostly, it's a team you gotta root for. It's a fun story.
I thought it was interesting, if the reports are accurate, that the Bruins were in at some point on doing that or trying to do that trade. That means, I guess, that Don Sweeney does want to find ways to improve this team even better than it is.
Yeah, well, that's his job, is to look around and make sure he turns over every stone, trying to find a way to make it better. And it's not unimportant for the team that exists like this, that thinks it has a chance to win a Stanley Cup, to get a boost at the trading deadline. It's a psychological pump up when the general manager, as he did last year so successfully, at least we thought, at the deadline, to add pieces to the puzzle instead of deleting them. It gives them the kind of confidence builder that you need going into the playoffs.
If he's going to do something, what do you think their biggest need is? Is it bigger on defense?
We've talked about another scorer, but if you look at you compare their top 6 scorers to some of the other teams in the league that are at the top of the heap, they're not far off. So maybe it's not quite as big a need. And lately they've been on fire. Marchand's been on fire. DeBrusk has come around. And they've gotten some secondary scoring too from guys like Heinen and Frederick. So I probably would say, with Forbert almost constantly on the injured list, I'd like to see them with somebody with some more bite. I mean, Wotherspoon has been a great fill-in, but if they could add to that with a guy that was, a steady Eddie back there and had a little snarl, I'd like to see that happen.
Speaking of Marchand, we were talking about this the other day on this show. How much of where they are this year, if any, do you give him credit for when it comes to his way of leading this team as a captain?
If you're not in the locker room, so it's hard to judge, but I think you'd have to agree that you've seen a more mature version of Brad Marchand. There's very few of the silly penalties and histrionics that go with it. And by the way, they got to stop taking penalties, which they take too many of. But I think Marchand has embraced the leadership role. I think he was so tight with Bergeron, and probably still is, and probably talks to him. But he seems like a real different man to me, in a good way. And I think that's made a difference to a team that needed, a steadying hand when there was the kind of turnover that they had over the summer and coming into training camp.
Mike, one thing you talked about in the past is, you'd like to see the toughness out of this team. I'd ask this question. How can a team, if they're not, that's not part of their identity, is that something that, you could just turn on in the playoffs? Or, how do you go about being a tougher team when it's really, or it doesn't look like it's in your DNA?
It's funny. I was reading about Rick Tocchet and the Vancouver Canucks, it's just a ridiculous turnaround. I mean, if it's not Montgomery, it certainly looks like Rick Tocchet's going to be the coach of the year. but he talked about toughness, and he was a really rugged guy, could really fight and hit, and he said the game has changed from toughness. It now means you just have to be resilient. You have to, if you make a mistake, you take a hit, you give a hit. The next man up has to do the same thing. It has to be persistence and persistence in a way that's you're unafraid, of course, but there's not as much to be afraid of as there once was. But it's that one line after the other has to keep doing what the line before them did in terms of intensity of forecheck and intensity of boxing out, that sort of stuff. It's a more technical type of approach, but it still requires effort and persistence.
Mike, you bring up the difference you've seen in Coyle and Marchand, and I think even Pasta, if you go back to a few weeks ago when I think you criticized him rightfully so, and he answered to that with a hat trick in the next game. But also Charlie McAvoy seems to be impressing a lot of people right now. Overall, with this team, have you seen that while the young guys are showing up, the older guys on this team, and older is crazy because Charlie McAvoy is like 26, have improved in place?
I think he's in the early 30s now. It's surprising. He looks like 26, but anyway, sorry to interrupt.
He's well, I say older guys, but he's still young. He's young in the real world. Do you see them all stepping up in the absence of Patrice Bergeron, and maybe that's the difference that they needed? They needed Patrice Bergeron to leave to make that jump?
I don't know if I would go that far. I mean, it's tough to say when you have such a great captain and a leader that if he leaves, you're all going to get better. But maybe that was a call to arms. Certainly, I think for Marchand it was. And again, I harken back to the coach. I mean, he has given more responsibility to different people, and maybe he had to because of the absence of those two centers. And they have responded. And I can't put my finger on exactly why, but the culture of this team has been pretty strong for a long time now. I mean, they lean on each other, they hold each other accountable, and that continues to be the case. And it's a prime reason why these older guys have taken up the leadership roles, and a prime reason why they're in first place overall.
Mike, one of the things that we've kind of been talking about, you kind of started off talking about it when you came on, is the expectations and what Sweeney might be thinking. I think now when you start to look at this team, I think the expectation should be we have a legitimate contender. And I'm hoping, and based on maybe, like you said, of Sweeney, picking up the phone a little bit, that they believe that as well.
I think that, well, it's tough. We had expectations of them making the playoffs maybe when they came into this season. It wasn't maybe win a round. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like we're going to see a team that at the All-Star break is this good and has been, has had some bumps but bounced right back. And they're 7-1-2 in their last 10 games. They've been tremendous since the Christmas break. And it'll be interesting to see, as it always is with a long break like this, how they come out of it. But I think they have to start. Yeah, when you see this, you have to continue to give them hope, and I have to start thinking like they might do this. They could possibly do this. But again, this team didn't do it last year in the playoffs. It folded like a cheap suit, and I think the coach had some responsibility there, and I think he's going to have to face some different approaches. But he's done a great job this year, and I hope that he's learned from his mistakes in the past playoff run. And the players learned that, you got to come to the party with your work boots on, and you're not going to expect just because you won the President's Trophy, you're going to be handed a first round or a second round win in the playoffs. It just doesn't work like that.
The anonymous athletic poll of NHL players results were released yesterday, and the player that most in the NHL would most like to punch in the face was Nick Cousins from the Panthers. I think Brad Marchand was second. But,
did he get a trophy?
You agree with that?
Well, I mean, he's certainly right up there, and I mean, it's what makes the game interesting. It's like we've lost that a little bit with Marchand. Frederic's kind of got a little of it, but not as filthy as Marchand was, and it adds a little spark to the game. And I'm not going to applaud it, but I'm certainly not going to condemn it. I mean, it's a guy that can change the the sort of tenor of the game, and that's a good thing to have in your arsenal if you're a coach.
Hey, Mike, just a quick question for you as a former coach. You mentioned it briefly, but first round of the playoffs, is there anybody in hockey under more pressure than the head coach of the Bruins this year?
Well, probably not. Maybe somebody in Toronto is under the gun again, but it's
Well, they lose every year.
Yeah, they do. But I think there is going to be pressure on him. The expectations now have changed from the beginning of the year to what they are. And yeah, I think he's going to feel the heat, but I think he felt the heat after the loss last year. And I reiterate that hopefully he's learned from that. And, you can't go with your heart and play Olmark, till the seventh game. It was a mistake. And he was hurt, or he was folding under pressure. And Lindholm needed a slap in the head to wake him up during the playoffs. And he's going to have to be tough when he needs to be tough. And he's going to have to be, kind when he has to be kind. But right now, you have to start believing in this team. And it's going to be April when we find out whether they have the intestinal fortitude to get it done.
Bunch of Mike Milbury corrections coming in on the Subaru of New England text line, and this happens to me a lot, where my age is misidentified. People think I'm older than I am. Charlie McAvoy, 26 years old.
I thought we were talking about Coyle there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So take your text line and shove it.
No, I was talking about McAvoy.
Yeah, Courtney was talking.
I said you brought up
Coyle.
Charlie Coyle.
Oh.
All right,
Could have been my mistake,
Ew.
I would never. Mike, I love you too much. I would never.
Thanks,
And
Coco.
I would like to extend an invitation this evening. If you are around and able, we will be at Loon at the Woodstock Inn in New Hampshire, and I am looking to have a dirty martini or two.
Oh.
I heard that. No, I'm not going to be out of town for our wedding this weekend. I'm sorry, I won't be there to watch Wiggy get stretchered off the slopes.
She blamed you for the last time that she was overserved.
Why?
She said it was your fault.
No,
In
I
Rhode
say that I was
Island.
trying to go martini. I was trying to match martinis with you in Rhode Island.
Well, that's a mistake. Clearly.
Right. You gotta know who you're competing with.
He's a veteran.
Yes.
All right, Mike Milbury, as always, a pleasure. We'll talk to you again next week.